You want to see, you haven't signed yet? Go ahead.
Recording has begun.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Sarah Hadd. I'm the Vice Chair of the Land Use Review Board. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We are now recording. I'd like to note that persons attending online will be required to accept the Teams disclaimer to rejoin the meeting once recording has begun. We are providing public access to the meeting via online video conference with additional access being offered by telephone as detailed in the hearing notice. If you're having a problem using Teams on your computer, you can call into the meeting on your phone by dialing 802-828-7667 and entering meeting ID 231-927-450-030. We ask that all phone and online attendees place themselves on mute now. To communicate during the meeting, press *6 to unmute and announce that you'd like to speak. Please wait to be acknowledged by myself before you continue to speak. I'd like to do a quick roll call and round of introductions. Brooke?
Brooke Dingleton, Land Use Review Board Member.
Alex Weinhagen, also Land Use Review Board member.
All right, and why don't we go around the room this way? We can serpentine it a bit. Thomas, why don't you go next?
Thomas Weiss, resident of Montpelier.
Hi, Christian Meyer, Director of Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Brian Voigt, Program Manager at the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Pamela Shears, Climate and Energy Planner at Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Keith Coven, Planner, Emergency Management and Transportation, CVRPC.
Pelletier, Planner at Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Lorraine Banbury, Planner at Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Jim Crafts, I'm Planning Commission. Planning Commission and the Mad River Valley Steering Committee.
Ray Catania, the Orange Planning Commission and also on the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Doug Greason. I'm Waterbury's representative to the regional planning. I also sit on the Regional Planning Commission's.
I'm Alice Farrell. I'm Berlin representative to the Regional Planning Commission.
I'm Robert Farrell. I'm with her.
Tim Sinnott, I'm a Montpelier Planning Commissioner.
Mike Miller, I'm the planning director for the city of Montpelier.
Addison Hart, I'm a planning technician at Central Vermont Regional Planning.
I'm Elizabeth Opladen and I'm also a planning tech with Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Steve Whitaker, resident of Montpelier.
You all, if you've not already signed in yet, we do have the board going around to ask that everybody here sign in. I'd like everybody online to please quickly introduce yourselves. We do have some staff. Catherine, I'll start with you.
Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Gott, Legal Service Specialist for the Central Office Land Use Review Board.
Thank you. And Tom Davis.
Tom Davis, Economic Development Director for the town of Northfield.
And Pamela.
I'm Pamela Sun, planner with Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
And Brian.
That's me.
Oh, okay. Nick. Nikki, sorry. I should put on my glasses for this.
Hi there, it's Nikki Sabato with Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I'm a planner.
And Annette.
Annette Smith, Vermonters for a Clean Environment.
Ruben.
Ruben McMartin, Senior Planner with Central Vermont Regional.
And Barbara.
Office Manager of Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you all. I think we have gotten through everyone. I'd like to give a brief explanation of how we're going to operate today. Under Act 1A1 of 2024, the Land Use Review Board approves regional plans, including future land use maps developed by the state's 11 regional planning commissions. In accordance with state statute and adopted guidelines, this is the board conducting the pre-application and consideration of public input. This public meeting is an opportunity for the applicant to present the request to the board, to ask questions, for us to ask questions of the applicant and the public to provide questions and comments on the pre-application. The board will create a pre-application response within 60 days of receipt of complete application. We're holding this within the 30 days of receiving a complete application. And once we finish this, future board meetings, the board will discuss our pre-application response, which we will get to the applicant within that 60 days and also post our database. If you'd like a copy of the pre-application response, you may also request it by emailing the board, which is act250.board@vermont.gov. All persons wishing to speak today should state their name each time before speaking. That's particularly important in this room because we are recording and transcribing as part of our minutes. I would also like to highlight that persons can submit information to the board via that email address. Once again, act250.board@vermont.gov, and we will take that into consideration if it's submitted within 30 days of the deemed complete, which is, what day was that?
July 8th.
July 8th. So we're still within that 30-day window. Are there any questions so far? Right. That I'd like to turn it over to Central Vermont to give us a presentation.
Sure, I'll get us started. Christian Meyer, here with obviously members of staff, our Central Vermont municipalities, our commissioners in the room as well as online to help with any specific questions if they come up. I just want to quickly outline a little bit and orient ourselves with this plan. This is very much a continuation of our current plan, with a focus on only making changes or alterations where required by statute. We are in the midst of a larger rewrite and we plan on making amendments in the coming years to this plan. In this presentation, we'll be focusing on some of those major changes, including our outreach process leading up to it, regional land use map, housing targets, and the benefits and burdens analysis. I think and certainly we'll take questions anywhere we need to along the way. Yeah, why don't we jump right into our outreach process. I want to start with the outreach because it started early and has been ongoing, beginning with connecting with stakeholders and tabling at our 10 public libraries throughout the region. These groups were targeted early on as they're often the groups that might not be regular attendees at our regional planning commissions, much less or even a local planning commission meeting. We also participate in other community events where available. And before we really even beginning any work on the map in earnest, met with all of the governing bodies of our municipalities to listen to their needs and development goals and planning goals for their municipalities so that they would really set the bedrock for our work. We are currently in the midst of visiting all our municipalities again, now with some more draft materials to show them, including all of our planning commissions. We've held one-on-one meetings and we've have delivered the plan, the map to all of our municipal offices and libraries. There may be the exception of one or two out there that'll get taken care of in probably early next week. I don't think we have any going out tonight. We developed an interactive map viewer, which allowed residents of the region to directly comment on the map itself. You can see here those comments linked to a geographic feature in yellow X's or crosses. Just to zoom in on how this plays out in practice, you see a comment here in Berry City. You can identify the little yellow X over the rural general classification there, and a comment that the parcel might be more appropriate as a growth area given its surrounding uses. I think this is a good example of our process. We began our mapping with our municipal future land use maps, and Berry City prioritizes this location as open space. So that is how it ended up as rural general, and would likely continue as rural general going forward based on local planning priorities. As we are looking at the map, it's probably a good time to shift things over to Brian, and he can take us on a little virtual tour of some sites we might not have made it to today.
Great, thanks, Christian. Brian Voigt, Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I'm going to talk about the draft regional future land use map for the next little bit, and wanted to start out big picture, and then we'll zoom into a few of the spots we visited today and a few that we did not have time for on our grand tour of Central Vermont. So looking at the summary of the different areas, we see that not surprisingly, the bulk of the Central Vermont region is comprised of one of the three rural land use classes. We do have a decent amount of resource-based recreation in of three different ski areas, two if you count both of the mountains at Sugarbush as one. A small handful of enterprise areas scattered throughout, and then again, our centers and neighborhoods, about 1.75%. I'll just note that not all of those areas are Tier 1 eligible, so you'll see a different number later, and just wanted to point that out now. So in terms of the Tier 1B eligible areas, at least, everything we see here in yellow and corresponding town names, because there are a few municipalities that have fairly small specs on the map, but not surprisingly, Berry City and Montpelier, the percent of their total area is largely comprised of these Tier 1 eligible areas. And then the majority of the rest of the communities, with Berry Town as the exception at 6%, hover in that close to 0 to just under 3%. And certainly for our smaller municipalities, that typically consists of the existing state designated village centers as the bulk of that Tier 1 eligible area. Now, I throw these other three onto the map because East Montpelier, Calais, and Cabot are not quite there yet. They have expressed interest in Tier 1B eligibility, but each of those three communities is missing at least one of the required elements to meet the minimum qualifications for Tier 1B eligibility. And so when we look at that in total, the yellow areas, those Tier 1B eligible areas, are about 1.4% of the total area of the region. And if, or more likely when, East Montpelier, Calais, and Cabot get their planning materials in order, that'll add just a bit more. So total estimated Tier 1 eligible areas is a little over 1.6%. So now, thought I'd make it exciting, at least for myself, by trying to do a live demo and see which version of the software crashes first. But we're going to visit just a handful of our municipalities and take you on a quick tour there. So looks pretty good. We didn't go parcel by parcel. We just took a big paintbrush. Like I said, keeping it exciting. 1 second. backup plan, but that's preferable. Apologies, I'm trying to access a different computer than the one that's in front of me. Okay. Here we are in Berry City. And we took a brief detour through Berry City today. We didn't make any stops, but what you're looking at on the map here is you see about 1,100 acres. So again, about 44% of the entire area of the municipality has either a downtown center or a planned growth area. It's a fairly compact area for the most part, surrounding the legacy designated downtown and the existing TIF district. And you'll note that the planned growth area boundary expands to the Berry town border to the northeast and to the south. Now, Berry City is not unique in that it faces a similar problem that most of our central Vermont and many of the communities throughout Vermont face, in that there are significant flood hazard concerns. And so currently we have our river corridors, special flood hazard areas, and floodways classified as rural conservation, which has certainly raised some eyebrows and received a little bit of pushback, but we'll talk more about that here in a minute. This entire area that you see is served by water and wastewater infrastructure, except for a couple of small corners, one in the southwest and one in the northeast corner of the planned growth area. Additionally, there's bus service throughout the city with a small gap in the planned growth area to the north and east of the town center, and there are ample sidewalks throughout the downtown center and the planned growth area to offer an alternative to vehicle transport to the central business area. Anybody have questions about Berry City before we move over to Berry Town?
Would you be able to just describe, this is Brooke Dingeldine. Would you be able to describe for us the neighborhoods that we actually drove through? We didn't make any stops as we progressed through Berry City. But I would like you to identify if you Prospect
Yep.
Heights area in particular. Then the neighborhoods that we also wove our way through the actual downtown.
Sure. So when we were on our tour, delay on the mouse, I'll look here. We came down through here. So this is that really steep part that came down in, made that bend. This is Prospect Heights, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes, but that's where we mostly slowed down. And then we turned left and made our way through here, across the Stevens branch down here, worked our way up past Hope Cemetery, and then proceeded out of town that way.
We did drive up through the north end a bit as well,
Oh,
through along Berlin Street and then back to Seminary Street.
Right, and so
That's
that,
Christian that's speaking.
Oh, sorry, Christian Meyer.
And Brian's speaking now.
Brian Voigt.
This is Brooke Dingeldine. For purposes of our transcript, you can't tell who the speaker is when we're all in the same room as opposed to folks that are online.
Gotcha.
So it's really hard to remember, but if you could try to say your name before you speak each time, that would be useful.
So Brian Voigt taking the speaking rod again here. We did travel through the north end to highlight some of the areas that were most impacted in recent flooding. Saw a couple of buyout sites and some other restoration sites as well in that part of Berry City. Okay, let's go over to Barry Town. Barry Town is a really interesting case in that it's fairly large, and it's got a number of these different tier one eligible areas sort of scattered throughout the town. So just under 1,200 acres, about 6% of the total municipal area, comprised of 4 village centers: Eastbury, Lower Graniteville, Southbury, and Upper Websterville. Planned growth area in Southbury, and 5 village areas surrounding those village centers that I mentioned previously. Most of these areas are served by water or wastewater. Much of the area is served by both, and in locations, speaking specifically about the tier one eligible areas, locations that aren't served currently by wastewater infrastructure, there are generally available class 1, 2, or 3 septic, on-site septic soils available in those locations. The village centers, look at an example here. Oh, geez. Expand on the existing legacy village center designations, but also incorporate a number of the historic districts in Eastbury, Lower Graniteville, and Southbury Village as part of either the village center or the surrounding village area. Barry Town also has a fairly substantial enterprise area related to the quarry and other works in that area. And then we've got a planned growth area in the Southbury area as well. And that kind of ties into around the village center that we see here, and really ties into Barry City as well. If there were better pedestrian transport options here, it might be something to think about in the future for expanding the village center planned growth. I'm sorry, the planned growth area in this location. Currently, this land is enrolled in the use value and appraisal program, and there's no indication that that landowner is looking to do something different with the land. I'll also point out one other location here in town, and we see 2 village areas bumped up against the Barry City boundary. Again, these areas are served by both water and wastewater. The municipal plan designates these areas as high potential for future growth, and the zoning in this area is consistent with high density mixed use development. So the idea here is that these village areas tie directly into the adjacent land growth areas that we find in Barry City. It's about Barry Town.
So I'm trying to, is that in that vicinity of, is it Cassie Street?
Um,
Right, is that,
I don't know where Cassie Street is, I'm sorry.
it's north of Berry City. PGA, and then it goes into VA.
Yeah.
You're almost there. It's, see the upper left
Street.
ink? That's,
Yeah.
that vicinity. Yeah.
Yep, that's Cassie Street right there.
Right, are there sidewalks in that vicinity?
No. There are not, but the traffic counts for those segments of road fall below the average daily total. So in theory, those streets would be walkable. Okay, moving on to Berlin. Brian Voigt speaking again, /still. So let's take a look at the downtown center. So we started our ride this morning relatively close to here at the park and ride. We did tour our way through this area here, so we got a good look at a lot of the work that's going on in the area of the mall. This is a particularly interesting, I thought, from a methodology perspective, site to work on. So we've got some planned growth area directly to the east. We've got a big enterprise area kind of to the south, and then a village center that's based off of a legacy village center designation with some village area surrounding that. The biggest constraint that we see here in terms of overall connectivity to the downtown center is the fairly significant river corridor and floodplain that's mostly to the west of the downtown center, and it really serves to disconnect the other parcels that we see to the west that are largely classified as rural ag and forestry, with a smattering of rural general parcels in there as well. This area is generally served by the municipal wastewater system. And if the municipality wanted to seek further density of development, could extend that wastewater system further to the south. Currently, there are adequate on-site septic soils in this location, so that does check that box. But I think for increased density of development, they'd need to move beyond even shared septic and tie into the municipal system if possible. And then there's kind of this hard stop on the north side of the development here. I'm sorry, of the designated downtown here, with the enterprise area, and that's still an actively used site for industrial activity in the region. We also visited Riverton. Alex's first time through Riverton, so we got to check that box for him, and heard from the zoning administrator in Berlin really about the not the disconnect, but how different the various portions of Berlin are from one another. And so for those of you that don't know, Riverton is separated by a fairly substantial hill from a large portion of the rest of Berlin. So we stopped at the fire department. We were looking out across at this enterprise area. And with some more careful planning, I think Berlin might be able to take advantage of the land assets that are there to expand the village center a bit, and then also bound that with some additional village area. You'll see once again, and this is sort of one of the two consistent themes. We've got significant flood hazard issues running through most of our legacy village centers and designated downtowns. And certainly in our more rural communities or rural portions of communities, those old or legacy village centers and or state register historic districts are typically surrounded by very large parcels that are enrolled in the use value and appraisal program or demonstrate ongoing activity related to agriculture and forestry. Other questions about Berlin?
This is Brooke Dingledine. When we were there, you pointed out for us the area that's the swimming hole, the recreational asset by the town. Is that correct?
It's an easement, I believe, that's owned by the land trust. What you
I
said.
don't know who finally owns it, but I know Trust for Public Land. This is Christian Meyer, Trust for Public Land, was the partner that helped make that happen. I don't know who final ownership it ended up with, but it is a public space.
You just point out for us on the map where that's located.
Believe it's in this general area here. So it was, so from the parking lot where we were standing in front of the fire station looking to the street, that recreational access site was off to the right of our view. So that would put it in the rural conservation area that we see right here.
In between the river and the fire station area.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
This is Sarah Had. I have a question about the PGA, actually sort of in the vicinity that we are along Airport Road, just across Route 62 from the downtown. Can you tell us what we're looking at within that PGA area along Airport Road in terms of streets, walkability, or sidewalks?
I can attempt to do so. This is Brian Voigt speaking. So limited sidewalk action in that area, although I know that they have been working on plans to develop more complete streets in the area. There are some bus routes that run through the area that does provide some relief from having to walk along busy roads, but I acknowledge, and I think the town would as well, there are some challenges getting across the street. There is a crosswalk here. I don't know if there's one on both sides, but on one of the two sides of that intersection, there is a crosswalk, so that at least partially facilitates crossing the busy road. There's a signal, a walk signal, as well as the crosswalk there. You know, how you get to the crosswalk, I think, does still remain a question. I think that the town will need to do some additional work to bring themselves completely in line with the complete streets for this area. No other questions? Brian Voigt speaking again. We will move over to Montpelier. So Montpelier, like Barry, is largely comprised of Tier 1 eligible area. You see that concentrated mostly in the center and east portions of the city. The downtown, designated downtown, a little bit easier to see with the parcels turned off. Proposed 200-acre downtown center extends beyond the existing state designated downtown to include additional areas that are served by water and sewer infrastructure and fall outside of mapped flood hazard areas. The planned growth area encompasses about 2,000 acres of land, generally, as you can see, surrounding the designated downtown, but also spanning the stretching over to the south side of the river in that location. Most of this area is also served by municipal water and wastewater. And those portions of the planned growth area that fall outside of those infrastructure service areas are generally close enough to existing infrastructure that future connections would be possible, given sufficient capacity. If a developer was interested in a higher density development on one of those lots. So we really prioritized areas outside of the map flood hazard areas for inclusion in this, and then also ensured that future land use map and zoning were consistent with high density mixed use development into the future. We also looked at while we were out on our tour, looked at the Country Club Road site, which is here. This parcel that I'm hovering over here, and it's adjacent to the Sabins pasture site. The city of Montpelier owns the Country Club Road site. The Sabins pasture site is by a private individual. And the city has big plans for development on the Country Club Road site up to, Michael, tell me when I'm wrong, 300 sites over the course of a couple of phases. The city also has two different grants currently that will help fund infrastructure expansion to the Country Club Road site. Questions on Montpelier?
This is Sarah Had. I have a few. If you could zoom in on the Capitol. That is peculiarity just because it's subtracted out from the legacy downtown area as a special use district. However, if you will note to the south, the National Life Insurance campus is enterprise. There seems to be an inequitable treatment of state-owned facilities throughout the region. I think this is just sort of an area to highlight where you're using a special use district, the capital and the airports, but there are other beach inns, garages, the National Life, which are enterprise or other land use categories. So I think it might be useful for me to hear about what some of the thought process was behind pulling the capital out as its own special use district.
I'll be honest, I didn't think a whole lot about it. We have one state capital and it seems pretty special to me. And I don't know that in my interpretation of the methodology that it would fit in any of the other land use classes.
This is Alex. Maybe you could just, because I had a similar question, less about the capital, more about the special use district as a whole. Can you just recount what types of things are included in the special use district?
Sure. So obviously the state capital, and then the other areas that were sorry, Brian Voigt speaking, the state capital, of course, and then really focused in on the Interstate 89, and state highway corridors.
There had, I believe, railroads were also.
Yes, thank you.
So it seemed like a lot of transportation related items, except for the capital or the special use.
And this is Alex. Wasn't Norwich University also in a special use
Norwich was also, yep,
designation?
correct. Yes, this is Brian speaking again. Norwich University also included in there. And, you know, in terms of the transportation piece, at least, understanding that our municipal roads and highways fall under the purview of our municipalities, I'd like to call out the state and federal transportation infrastructure, not because, at least in some cases, I don't think it fits into the developed fabric, but more to note that these areas would represent particular planning challenges if you are making or have intentions to make improvements, because those lands fall outside of the municipal control. And so all the big ideas that come out of the local grassroots level aren't always able to be implemented because of pushback from either state or federal agencies.
So this is Sarah Hatt again. Could you zoom in on the on and off ramps in Montpelier? And I think the other thing that you're zooming in on that I'll speak to is just how we're treating, zoom in a little bit more.
Not the on.
Sorry. South.
To the south. Oh, yeah.
And if you could turn on the ortho photos underneath for some picture. If you take a look at the way that we've looked at different roads throughout the state, a lot of times the future land use areas will join in the middle of the right of way. We haven't seen so many roads sort of fall out of that. I just want to call attention to this one area as it's not designated as anything, including a special use. I think there are holes in some of the mapping, and this was a particular one that need to be addressed.
This is Alex. Just to clarify, National Life property, that is not state-owned, right? That is, I think, Sarah, that is a privately owned property where the state leases building space. So it's, I think it's different than the state-owned properties in terms of being classified as enterprise.
Yeah, this is Brooke Dingley, and it's owned by National Life Insurance Company. And then the leases of this indicated space to the state.
But this is Alex again. Are there other state properties beyond the Capitol complex that are in Montpelier or not? I should know that,
Yes.
being a state employee, but.
So this is Sarah had, and I think one of the areas is surrounding Capel is what's referred to usually as the Capel complex of state-owned buildings. You have, V-Trans, EMV, the executive building, which are all surround the Capel, which are also state-owned. But yet included in the downtown.
Cause Alex, there's our building too, right?
Correct. Sarah had our building for the record is on 10 Baldwin.
This is Brian Boyd speaking. Any other Montpelier questions?
This is Brooke Dingledine. When I try to click on the parcel that Sarah was drawing our attention to, where the entrance and exit of 89 is, I don't get a separate parcel label or indication. That triangular piece to the east of 89, that's north of the entrance ramp, north.
This is Brian Voigt speaking again. There is a gap in the classification where I apparently missed a spot in my rush to get this out the door.
This is Brooke again, but I'm talking about the actual parcel is not, it does not reveal to me any ownership of it, the way all the other parcels do. So I'm wondering if there's.
This is Alex. When I click on it, Brooke, in our, future land use map viewer, it just comes up as road right of way.
Yes.
So I think that's sort of how it's classified. Apparently, it's a very large road right of way. A bunch of forest in between the actual roads.
Correct. So Brian Voigt speaking again, and that's what you see here. I just enlarged that, but the property type from the grand list, if I scroll back over, it'll say the property type is right of way road. So my assumption is it's either owned by the state or the federal government, depending on where you're talking about there, but probably mostly the feds because I believe that's the interstate going through there.
So this is Sarah Hattigan. I think the only thing that I really want to touch on while we're in Montpelier is we did conduct a site visit. And there was some information provided at that. We can provide a time later for the other individuals that were there, but I think, Brian, if you could take us through just some of what was presented in terms of observations there. I'll recount that we were within their water and sewer service area, that in terms of the drive in, there was not necessarily the presence of bike and bike path and sidewalk, but there were plans for that. And that there were definitely pathways sort of linking back into the city from that area.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm missing anything else in terms of.
Yeah, this is Brian Boyd. Thank you, Sarah, for that concise recap. Also note that at the bottom of the hill, as we were leaving Country Club Road and turning back out onto 2, right before the railroad tracks, right after, there is the multi-use path that also crosses that. So although there's not a sidewalk or bike lane currently up to the Country Club Road site, there is the bike path that comes from the downtown center all the way out to that spot. And then once the city starts to spend down their grant funding, the a bike lane in the uphill direction and a sidewalk on one side or both sides of Country Club Road, just one side of Country Club Road will be installed. Okay, moving over to Moortown, just really quickly, again, seen this, I'm sure, plenty of times, but in Moortown, there's no proposed expansion for the Legacy Village Center, which we see here in the center. We designate some areas to the north and south-ish as village area. I'll note that the town of Moortown has, on more than one occasion, tried to pass a bond vote for wastewater infrastructure to serve the village center. They've been unsuccessful in their efforts to do that, not the least of which because they've had difficulty identifying an appropriate disposal site. Also note that to the east there, you see there's the elementary school as well as the large property behind the elementary school that includes the town forest, as well as some property just to the north that's still enrolled in the, or is enrolled in the use value and appraisal program. I did look into, this is Moortown Mountain Road, the road you were talking about earlier, Sarah. I did look into the parcels along this, along Moortown Mountain Road and sort of in between that and Moortown Common Road, which stretches over that way. They're just not designated for growth. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this area, it is pretty steep and would be fairly challenging, both from a multimodal perspective, but also from a expanding infrastructure perspective, and trying to run either water or wastewater up into an area like that would almost certainly be prohibitively expensive. Additionally, their future land use map doesn't call for a significant amount of development in that area and really stresses of maintaining the sort of the rural nature of that part of town. But the reason I wanted to show you Moortown is that we did include a village area in the northwest corner of Moortown. Just zoom out a little bit here. This is the downtown center in Waterbury, Winooski River in between. Obviously see a fairly significant amount of space taken up by that. CVRPC had been working with the towns of Moortown, Duxbury, and Waterbury on a potential neighborhood development area application, and just never really got that quite over the finish line before the state stopped accepting applications for that. The town of Waterbury is very much interested in facilitating additional development in this northwest corner of Moortown because they have currently excess capacity for both water and wastewater that could serve that area. So this is one of a small handful of examples in the central Vermont region where we've got a village area that's piggybacking off of a downtown center or planned growth area in an adjacent municipality. Let's jump over to Northfield. We'd looked at a couple of things in Northfield of interest. So we took a trip through Northfield Falls and drove up into this area just above Northfield Falls. Found out that the road that says it's there isn't there, so that was a fun detour. As I mentioned before, one of the big challenges with Northfield is the fact that the Northfield Falls Village Center and corresponding village area progresses to the south, and the downtown center and planned growth area in the heart of Northfield is really stretching up to the north. I'll note really quickly before we go into the downtown, on the other side of both the river and the road from Northfield Falls are fairly large parcels, many or most of which are enrolled in the use value and appraisal program. As we move to the south, we focus in on Northfield's downtown center. This expands their legacy village center in the area, as well as the historic district, and stretches it across the main drag there, and then surrounds the bulk of the downtown center with a planned growth area. And one spot I'd like to call out in particular, where we did another quick stop on our visit. This is the Darn Tough production facility right here, tagged as an enterprise area. And then we see this finger sticking off to the north of the downtown center that's designated as a planned growth area. It's the Foran property. And the town and the developer have been working real hard to come up with a plan to develop a portion of this much larger parcel that the bulk of which is still classified or is classified as the rural ag and forestry. We cut off the planned growth area to the west, even though the parcel continues further in that direction, because once again, this is all within the river corridor and special flood hazard area, and the developer has not expressed interest expanding into that portion, and in fact has discussed the potential for developing some type of a multi-use path through there that would further bolster the connection between Northfield Falls and downtown Northfield. Alex mentioned earlier, the Norwich campus, for the most part, is designated as a special use area, but I'll also note that Norwich owns a big chunk of this land over here to the east that eventually connects to Northfield's town forest and Payne Mountain. Wonderful resource if you haven't been out there, but definitely an inhibitor to further expansion to the east in this particular location. Any questions about Northfield before we move on?
This is Alex. Nitpicky minor question, Northfield Falls, to the north. There's an odd rural general parcel, it looks like, right in the, yeah, right there. Why?
That's very nitpicky, Alex. I'm kind of at a loss. I would have to look at what was going on there, and it's possible that it's just been misclassified.
This is Alex again. Not a problem, just it jumped out at me from a mapping perspective, so I thought I'd ask.
Brian, and I can totally understand why. Thanks for pointing that out. If that's the only one, I would be surprised. Okay, moving over to Plainfield. We spent a little bit of time in Plainfield, met with several members of the community. This big pink blob off to the left is the former Goddard College. And this parcel here to the right is the East Hill expansion area, Village East expansion area. I'll note that the vast majority of the village area in Plainfield is included in their existing neighborhood development area. We did expand the village center a little bit to include much of the Plainfield Village Historic District, as well as a little bit of land to the north. And again, like most of our other municipalities and their historic village centers, certainly facing some significant flood hazard pressure in this portion of Plainfield, which is why we advocated before for the inclusion of the Village East parcel in the neighborhood development application that the town submitted year and a half or more ago. We also toured some of the highest impact areas from previous flooding in Plainfield as well, and saw some of the remaining destruction, some of the buyout properties, and a little bit of the rehab work that has gone on in that area. Any questions about Plainfield?
This is Sarah Hatt. Just taking a look at some of that village area versus village center. Particularly to the north and east along Route 2, you have slivers that are surrounded by village center, but instead are village area. There's another area to the north over by the old college campus along Sugarwood, where it's served, some of it's in the village area, some of it's in the rural general. Can you talk about some of the thought process with village area as it surrounds the village center, and why not have a larger village center?
Well, I can certainly try. So my thinking, at least in terms of terminating the village area at this point, is that once you get beyond that, you're past the sort of quarter mile buffer, and there are not sidewalks. This is a relatively heavily traveled road through here, so extending it beyond that seemed like a bit of a stretch. Certainly not opposed to it, but I did not think that this area met the qualifications to be included in a village area. Why this falls to a village area instead of being included in a village center, I have to look back at my notes to provide any more detail, but if short version, if the board thinks that it's appropriate to include that as the village center, I certainly don't have any objection, and I doubt that the municipality would either. All right, and the last stop on our tour here is in Waterbury, and we'll pop into the downtown. So we see the downtown center, which builds on the existing state designated downtown to include a portion of the Waterbury Village Historic District, and then also additional lands that fall outside of the mapped flood hazard areas. And I'll note that the entirety of this downtown center is served by water and wastewater infrastructure as part of the Edward Farrar Utility District. We've also proposed about a 60-acre planned growth area to the north and the east of the downtown. So just on the other side of the Route 100, Route 2 interchange, as well as directly adjacent to the downtown. The lower down in the town here, we see a fairly large enterprise area. This is called out in the municipal plan and is currently used for production type activity and does not necessarily lend itself to easy inclusion, in my opinion, into the downtown center unless industry were to move elsewhere, in which case, depending on the quality of land left behind, that might be an idea for a future time. We also, so this is the interstate that flows through the planned growth area and this village area further to the east. I'll note that there are sidewalks that connect planned growth area to the planned growth area to the village area. And Alex, here's another one. You don't have to tell me. I'm noticing now live, at least my software hasn't crashed yet. So this area on the north side of Route 100. So Route 100, this road that comes through here. So this area on the north side of Route 100, when we met, one of the times that we met with the town of Waterbury staff and volunteer planning commission, select board members, they expressed some concern, firstly, about us not including the Randall Street properties in the downtown center. This area has been frequently flooded. There are some designs on or intentions to do some flood mitigation measures in these areas, but nevertheless, this whole area you see in green is part of the river corridor, and in fact, it extends even further into the downtown, but not wanting to remove any of the legacy designation. We cut that border off with the boundary of the previous, or with the existing legacy downtown, designated downtown. But when we met with municipal staff and community members, they also expressed some interest in development in this part of town. So again, on the other side of Route 100, I do think that this is a prime site for future development. There is water and wastewater utility service there. I do think that multimodal transport is an issue that will still need to be resolved. And I know that those conversations are ongoing within the town in terms of planning for something other than vehicular traffic through that area. And then I'll also point out Waterbury Center. This was again another fairly interesting one. So there is a legacy village center in this area, and there is water service in this area as well. But you'll note that we've got a river corridor that runs through Route 100 again right here, and a state register historic district on the west side of Route 100 here. So while there may be some pedestrian crossing issues for Route 100, this road, whose name I'm currently forgetting, is fairly low traveled in terms of average annual or average traffic counts, and the speed limit here is 25. So it does seem likely that there's a decent linkage between the west side of Route 100 and the historic village center in this area. And then bounded to the north here by some enterprise areas, the Cold Hollow Cider Mill, and a few other things located in this area. And then quite a bit of rural conserved land that's held in conservation further west of the boundary of the village area.
So this is Sarah Had. I think you answered part of my question already, is taking a look at, I think that's called Hollow Road as it intersects with Route 100. And you have the village center, but then you have sort of the other village center along 100. And why not perhaps have more expansive village center, recognizing some of that historic and also commercial core along Route 100. And I think my question is sort of the same as it was before. Why village area, not village center?
This is Brian Voigt speaking again. And just so I understand your question, Sarah, are you suggesting that a village centered on the west side of Route 100 would have been more appropriate in the area where the State Register Historic District would be? Is that what you're asking for there? Or asking me to reflect on there?
Yes.
Thank you. So quite simply, I thought it would be odd to have two village centers in that close of proximity. So why not expand the existing village center? I don't have a great reason not to, and I certainly wouldn't be opposed, but I think I was reading the methodology through a bit more of a conservative lens and thought that the area currently designated as village area was more appropriately situated as such. I do think that the town would be supportive of expansion there, although their primary focus seems to be continued development in the downtown area. That's it for the virtual tour. I just have a couple of other slides here, if I can get back to my slideshow. So as I mentioned, or as we mentioned on the tour, there has been some feedback that we've received since we've submitted the pre-application map to you. And so we wanted to talk through a couple of proposed changes to the map that we would likely intend to implement prior to the final submission. So the first of these is the Prospect Heights in Berry City. Touched on that briefly on our virtual tour of Berry City, but the image on the left is the future land use map as submitted, and the image on the right shows the proposed change. I won't make everyone look to see what the difference between the two images is. It's this area here. This is the Prospect Heights parcel. Again, the city has funding to acquire and develop this site, and they have plans for phased development there. They've got $9 million to pay for extending municipal infrastructure to the site. And their first phase would include about 40 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. And based on the grant funding that the city has received, about 75% of those would be required to meet affordability standards. And then the long-term vision for that site involves a market-driven mix of single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, and possibly larger multifamily structures with a grand total of about 90 units estimated to be constructed on that Prospect Heights site. So this was a parcel that was pointed out to us by the city in conversation with them and the planning commission at a recent meetup. Similarly, there's a site in Berrytown along Richardson Road. So Richardson Road is this road here that comes north out of Berry City, and in a similar vein to the village areas that we have situated on the northern border, and there's another one that's on that eastern border of Berry City. When we were talking with Berrytown, they said, yeah, we really like this one to the north and the other one that you've designated to the east, but why not here? Doesn't this meet the same characteristics as the other two? And taking a closer look at the town's planning materials, I tend to agree with that assessment. This area here along Richardson Road, just like the other two village areas that expand out of Berry City, are served by water and or wastewater. And in theory, this proposed area could be expanded all the way to the north up to here, based on the fact that there is wastewater. I believe it's wastewater. It might be water. It's one of the two, water or wastewater. I'm pretty sure it's wastewater that extends all the way up to this boundary here, where then there's kind of a nice hard cutoff line. However, you're starting to get a bit far afield from the adjacent planned growth area. There aren't sidewalks in any of these neighborhoods, but even Richardson Road does not receive that much traffic. And there are certainly neighborhood routes that you could take to stay off of the main road to get down into that planned growth area and eventually potentially into the downtown center for Berry City. And then one other bit of feedback that we're just beginning to reason with is in the town of Warren, and we at least tentatively call this the Sugarbush Village Center. I don't have a graphic to go along with that, but when staff were out meeting with the Warren's Planning Commission, there was, for those of you that don't know the town of Warren, there are some fairly significant development constraints in and around the Legacy Village Center in Warren. So in the Warren Village, the Mad River runs along one side, and then there's some municipal properties and larger privately held properties just outside of that. So not a lot of expansion potential in the existing village center. And so the Planning Commission and municipal staff came back and said, well, what about the idea of a new center somewhere up around the base of Lincoln Peak, so the Sugarbush South, but not necessarily as part of the mountain itself. There are still some privately held lands up there. There is water at least, and I believe wastewater up there as well. There's plenty of commercial activity. The one place where it might fall a little bit short in terms of a village center would be sort of any cultural activities, although I think it would be hard to argue that skiing is not central to the culture of the Mad River Valley. So if you'll allow us to stretch the meaning of cultural institution a little bit, maybe we can check that box as well. And I don't know, Jim, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you had anything else that you might want to chime in about that area at this time? No.
Great summary of it, thanks. I mean, it is an existing village and for a long time.
Jim, say your name.
Jim Crafts, Warren. It is an existing village and for a long time there was a lot of commercial activity there. There were several stores, restaurants. And it did get a lot of, kind of foot traffic, so interesting if we could realize that.
Yeah, thanks. This is Brian Voigt again. Existing village, but not a village center, not through the state designation program. Okay, so getting close to the end here. We touched on this a little bit while we were out and about today. I know that Christian has talked, or I believe Christian's talked to Brooke about this as well. And we've been really struggling with these areas that are mapped river corridors, flood hazard areas, special flood hazard areas, or floodways. And obviously, when you assign a land use class of rural conservation, and that big old bright green color stands out right in the middle of downtown Barrie or downtown Waterbury, folks tend to take notice. And so we've been toying around with this idea of a special use land use class that we would call resilience. And I'll just read the definition as proposed. The resilience land use class identifies developed areas that face significant exposure to flood hazards and where long-term community resilience should guide future land use decisions. These areas generally include lands within river corridors, special flood hazard areas, and other locations subject to recurring flood impacts where existing development is expected to remain. Future growth should be carefully managed. This designation recognizes the importance of the many historic downtowns, villages, and developed riverfront areas in the region, while encouraging land use decisions that reduce long-term flood risk and support resilient communities. So just for a little bit of context in the central Vermont region, and understanding that we can't take land that is currently in a legacy designation out of said designation. I'll note that more than 400 acres of legacy designations are located in a river corridor, special flood hazard area, or flood hazard, or a floodway. So approximately 900 parcels touch that area. So that 400 acre area. So 900 parcels throughout the region have some intersection with that hazard area, with a total grand list value of $800 million. Now, I've read how to lie with statistics. I know how to lie with maps. So that's the big number that should get everybody, if you're nodding off, to look up. I'll revise that number down a bit. 290 of those 900 parcels are completely within a flood hazard area, floodway, or river corridor. Grand list value for those parcels, $180 million. So it's a little bit better, but it's still a lot of money, and that's just in central Vermont. So we're really, struggling with how to accommodate continued development in these locations without increasing the level of risk for existing structures and not placing new construction in areas that's going to either be problematic for themselves or for adjacent structures or downstream structures here. So a couple of examples of what this might look like. We've already seen Barrie City. This is the view of Barrie City that we saw before. Lots of green in Barrie City. Under this new special use resilience class, everything that just flashed in blue, and I'll go back and forth there, would be designated as that special use resilience class. And then all the land that you see that is still in the rural conservation is like a cemetery or other parkland or wetlands in excess of 5 acres. There's another fairly urban example for the town of Waterbury. Again, we've got the state office complexes. The Winooski River runs here along the border between Waterbury and Duxbury. And when we look at that special use resilience or potential special use resilience class here, we see that it covers a fairly substantial portion of the screen that we're looking at. But I'll also point out, in particular, if you focus in on the village areas over to the northeast-ish, that none of the lands proposed as village area would fall within that special use class. And then the last example here I'll show is in Calais. I told you we were going to Calais today, just on my computer. Here we are looking at one of the village centers in Calais. And I like this example because I really think it brings home the point that there are these substantial amounts of land in our rural areas, but even in our more urban areas, if we look hard enough, that if designated for resilience use, so again, not suggesting that development won't happen there, but a development that does happen there needs to demonstrate that it's not going to adversely impact neighboring properties or increase flood risk. But maybe these areas are targeted for things like green infrastructure, floodplain restoration, and other measures that would improve the overall resilience of the community and additionally protect downstream neighbors from adverse impacts. So again, an idea that we've been toying with. We have begun this conversation with the Regional Planning Committee and need to have further conversation here with the full board of commissioners. Christian, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on anything else there.
Sure, Christian Meyer. We think this matters because if nothing, essentially these areas would have similar, be treated similar to other rural areas. But if you look at our role as a regional planning commission and where we get involved in and where our responsibilities really overlap with a local development project, one of those areas is Act 250. And you can imagine a situation where maybe a 12-unit development was taking place in downtown Barrie, triggers Act 250. Are we as a region going to look at that in the north end, the area neighborhoods we drove through today, and say, well, that's not compatible with our rural conservation land use area? So we feel there's a hole in the methodology that doesn't accurately represent doesn't allow the region to represent its actual goal and visions for development. So that's where sort of the inception for this idea came from. First and foremost in those existing areas where existing development is.
This is Brian Voigt again, and I'll just say, we're treating this map, and certainly it's an aspirational document. The regional plan writ large is aspirational, but treating this map as an avenue to have these forward-looking conversations, some of which are fairly difficult to have certainly when people see their property in downtown classified as rural conservation. First, it confuses them, and then it frustrates them, and at least occasionally that folks have gotten fairly upset about it. So we fully recognize that conservation isn't what we're advocating for, at least not in terms of conservation as in no development, but really wanting to point out, much like my comment about the state and federal highways, although these lands might be under the purview of a local jurisdiction, they're worth calling out specifically on this map because they do present long-term challenges to our municipalities. And I think it would be a failure of this map to not point out the particular challenges in these locations, given our recent and not so recent past with flooding events in central Vermont.
This is Sarah Had. I see that we do have some hands raised online. However, I would like to get to the board first before we get to the public. As I think that was a lot of questions that were raised, and I think I would like to respond, but would other board members?
So this is Alex. I think we need to do a time check. Per our agenda, we were going to have the regional commission give their presentation and then have board questions. And I think we're past the time for the presentation, but that's because we've been asking questions during it. I think you have more to present. This is just the future land use map. We still need to get to housing targets and environmental justice. And so I want to make sure we actually have enough time to get through things before we dive too deep down the future land use rabbit hole further. But Brooke, Sarah, how do you want to move forward with this, so that we get to everything?
So this is Sarah Had, and I think this is an important question that has been raised that we should discuss, albeit perhaps briefly. We do have time that for state partner presentations at 3:30, so we are going over into our time, but we've been asking questions along the way. Do we want to answer this question and try and get through the remaining 4 slides?
Well, if we're just talking about the special use, this is Alex speaking. If we're just talking about the special use resilience possible category, I'm not sure that we're going to answer that question right now. I think we can ask questions to the regional commission about their thoughts on it. It's not part of the map currently. It's just an idea you have. But I don't want to make this sound like we're going to give you a final judgment on whether that's a good idea or not. Maybe just ask some questions and then move on.
Would agree.
This is Brooke.
This is Brooke, sorry.
This is Alex. I do have thoughts on it. So yeah, if you want to spend a few minutes, Sarah, we can do
Sure.
that. Sure.
Sure, and this is Sarah Had, and I will quickly share my thoughts, which are, I think Central Vermont is an anomaly. You have utilized more of the special use than other regions have that have also wrestled with this question. We've seen a lot of different areas that have also been so adversely affected by flooding. I'm thinking of Lamoille in particular, and have also wrestled with this question and have not, I think in Lamoille, I was recalling, the only time that they employed special use was for an asbestos mine and other undevelopable sites. NVDA, I believe, was the same.
Yep.
We've really seen the special use district used very sparingly. So I think this was going into Central Vermont, a more expansive use for transportation corridors, where we've seen other areas pull back and really utilize the surrounding areas, future land use areas for those transportation corridors. And so I think I hear the concern, but I think that further utilization of the special use district might be not necessarily direction to go in, given the consistency that we're trying to create throughout the state of Vermont.
Yeah, this is Alex. I have the same concern, mostly about this idea of a resilience category. I understand the logic of it, and I think there's a lot of merit. But no other region is doing this, and I think this would call for a statutory change to add a new category to recognize this, as opposed to a one-off, within just this region. I think that in the Berry City area in particular, we have other downtowns that are being mapped as a downtown center that are admittedly partially within flood hazard areas, and that's okay to do that mapping. There's nothing in the statutory language that I'm aware of that prohibits a downtown center or a village center from being in a flood hazard area. And the fact that some of these areas already are that's just the way it is. And we're not, while we might want to prioritize doing new development in additional expansion areas, we're not going to pick up and move whole segments of communities to different areas. Maybe we'll move a little bit more in Berry City. But in any case, yeah, I have reservations about going in this direction. And yeah, consistency is part of it.
Well, this is Brooke Dingledine, and I would differ from my colleagues' opinions. We come from very different perspectives, and I know they live and breathe the methodology and know it very, very well. To me, this makes a lot of logical sense. And for example, in Lamoille, we have an asbestos mine. There's no asbestos mine elsewhere in the state. I think the overemphasis on consistency throughout the state, that's what we have regions for. So I think it's a very logical use of special use. It's a different special use than other areas, so to me, it makes a lot of sense, and I don't necessarily think it's, I mean, if you're using the special use category, which is a category, and it's sort of a subcategory in a way, to me, I don't find that objectionable. Nor do I think that because Central Vermont has more areas that they've specified as special use, regardless of what kind of special use it might be, like the capital. The capital's only in one place in the state. So I think that we have a difference of perspective on it that we will have to talk about and work through a little bit more, maybe with our other board members, because I'm just articulating one of 5 opinions about this. So.
And this is Sarah Had. I think we need to be very cautious because in looking at particularly environmental benefits and burdens, environmental justice, we have within other areas, I'm thinking Rutland, where they came in and they were showing a lot of their transportation corridors as being special use. We pulled them back in a different direction and establishing a special use category, particularly around flood impacted areas, which also are some areas that you're dealing with affordability issues in affected populations. I think that there's a lot of caution that I want to provide around that. And it can be a conversation, but I think that it's perhaps fraught with developing more issues.
Yeah, this is Alex. I have the same concern, especially in places like Berry City, where areas that are not being included in the downtown center, which will therefore not be eligible for benefits that the state provides to downtown centers, are also areas where folks have not only been heavily hit by flood events, but also maybe in environmental justice focused populations, and to deny them access to benefits in favor of putting them in a special use resilience category where those benefits don't extend. Like I once again, I want to say I see the logic, but I think the ultimate end of that is it's important to understand why the inconsistency matters, and that's part of why it matters, is that we don't want folks in Berry City disadvantaged in a way that folks in Johnson are not, because your region chose to do it differently than the other region when we are trying to have a somewhat at least consistent statewide future land use mapping effort and extend those benefits and recognize those burdens in a consistent way across the state.
So I think this is Sarah Had. I'd like to move on. We have time to get through. And Tom Davis, I can see that you have your hand raised. We're not yet to public questions and comments, but is there something particular at this point of time that you have to share?
Thank you. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to point out on that process that you're looking at on the river corridor, the one thing that's difficult in this process for towns like Northfield is, for instance, we're building a 32-unit apartment complex in our designated village center that was a brownfield. And it's in the river corridor. However, because of topography, it's 84 feet down to the river. And I just want to make sure, however these processes are done, that topography gets built in so somebody doesn't just look at a map and say, oh, no, they're in the river corridor. I mean, if that site that we're going to build this on flooded, the entire town would be destroyed. So I just putting that out there as how that process goes about, that somewhere in there topography is part of it.
Thank you, Tom. This is Sarah Had. I would like to just quickly reflect that in 2024, you had Act 121 as well as Act 181, and 121 was absolutely looking to provide great clarity around river corridors. That's what our sister agency at the Agency of Natural Resources is working on and clarifying some of those models. We're both building planes and flying them, so I understand your question and thank you for it. With that, Brian, would you please move us along?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Lorraine Banbury. I'm one of the planners at CVRPC, and I was helping doing the calculations for the housing target methodology as we looked at the needs of central Vermont and looked at the ways that other regions were calculating their housing targets. We found that relying very heavily on the planned growth areas quickly concerns some of our municipalities. And so what we found worked best in terms of kind of equitably distributing our housing targets were to put 40% to those downtowns and planned growth areas, and then 20% to village centers and village areas. And you can see what towns had or what municipalities had the most of in downtown centers and planned growth areas. Berry City, Berry Town, Berlin, Montpelier, depending on which side of the pink or the purple you're going on, Northfield and Waterbury. And when we get to the targets, you're going to see that as expected, those are certainly municipalities which have a significant amount of the housing targets. 20%, as I said, went to villages, and then 40% went by population. And Brian made us a fantastic map showing us how those got distributed. So Montpelier is our cornerstone. They're in the middle with 21%. It actually has about 25% of those core 4 high density areas, followed by Berry Town, Berry City. Let me pull up my numbers right here. So Berry Town, Berry City, Waterbury, Northfield, and Berlin. And then our 2 smaller ones, Cabot is one of those that might become, when they pass subdivision regulations, which they are working on diligently, then they would have village areas, which would increase their capacity. Cabot is actually feeling pretty confident in their ability to meet the housing goals or the housing targets that we have for that municipality. And I'm happy to entertain any questions or clarify anything.
All right, this is Alex. Yeah, I'm curious, on the last slide, you talked about 40% of the housing targets in centers and planned growth areas, 20% in village centers and village areas, and then 40% by population, but population is not a future land use category. So where is the 40% going?
Right. So we have a target of 100 to distribute. So of that 100 units, we would give 40% of those to the proportion of the total regional total of those FLUAs. So towns that have more downtown centers and planned growth areas would get proportionally a greater number of those targets. And then of those 100, we have 20, which are going to go proportionately to the amount of village center or village area municipality has. And then that last 40 houses would get distributed to how much of the regional population proportionally folks have. Does that make sense?
And so I guess my question is, there's geographic specificity in the first 2.
Right.
And then what I'm trying to get at is there geographic specificity in the last 40%? Will some of that 40% be in a downtown center based on that community's population? Or is that last 40% in rural areas spread across communities by population? Is there geographic specificity with regard to the future land use area for that last category?
So I think when it came time to, and I'm going to let Brian weigh in here in a minute. I think when it came time to looking at that last 40%, we were really considering how much of the region does this community already have? So, and not being too prescriptive, understanding that these targets are goals. It would be great if we can get them all into those core 4 FLUAs, but also recognizing that where people build in Cabot or in Marshfield is going to be different from where people build in Montpelier. So it was a way to really acknowledge for those communities that how large they are respective to each other. where people choose to build within those communities is going to largely continue to be relative to where they are in terms of each other. But I don't know if Brian or Christian have anything they want to weigh in on there.
Yeah, this is Brian Boyd. That Alex, that 40% by population, the geographic specificity there is not tied to a future land use class. It's tied to the municipal population. So the geographic unit there is the municipal boundary. And in response to your question before, like, could some of that 40% by population be built in the downtown center? Sure. They're sort of irrespective of one another. The first two are based on the presence of specific future land use classes. The last one, that 40% by population, you could think of as a fairly simple gravity model. Where there's more population, there's likely to be more development in the future. Where there's less population, proportionally speaking, relatively speaking, excuse me, that is what we would expect to see in terms of the distribution of future development throughout the region.
This is Alex. Thank you. That's all I needed. I just had a little trouble conceptualizing it. I think I understand now.
So this is Sarah Had, and I think a little bit of a different bent on that is in taking a look in other areas and distributing the housing targets. There is usually a tie to the infrastructure and density needs. And I think in one of our site visits today, I think it was maybe Northfield said, well, they're doing good there at 50%. But in terms of evaluating the accommodation of housing targets, it looks like you're looking at the future land use areas and populations, but in terms of being able to implement, how are you weighting infrastructure capacity in accommodating housing targets?
This is Brian Boyd. It's currently not factored into the equation because we do not have the data throughout the region to support that type of analysis. It would certainly make a lot more sense to do it that way. We would almost certainly produce more realistic numbers, but we don't have the data at this time to support that type of analysis.
And this is Lorraine Banbury. I would just add in that another way that we've thought about potentially modeling this would be to look at growth within our municipalities in the past 5 years. One of my other hats, I'm very aware of the permitting and growth in Marshfield, which is where I'm zoning administrator, but also doing the housing look at Montpelier and really getting deep into that, looking at the DHCD dashboard. It doesn't necessarily correspond as strongly as I would like, especially in towns that have maybe 10 permits a year for new single family developments. So it was really challenging to get a sense of how much growth our 23 municipalities have had, especially when you're talking about 1,200 people towns. So that's a long-term goal, is to get a better sense of what those trajectories have been in different municipalities, but we didn't have the data, as Brian was saying, to really make those convincing numbers.
Thank you. This is Sarah Had. I'd like to keep us moving to try and pull us back on time if we can. So.
Yeah, so this is Kari Pelletier. We wanted to touch on the environmental justice analysis within the plan, recognizing that it's a new component and requirement under Act 154 and State Goal 15. And so while a lot of this work was already a part of our planning process, with this law, it now formally embeds it within it. And it was clear that there's a couple of different requirements of this goal in terms of meeting it. And so the first bit Christian talked to earlier, which is that meaningful participation and community outreach. And the second bit is really looking at how benefits and burdens are distributed across the region. So we began, as you can see on the map on the right, identifying environmental justice focused populations. And we followed the state definition completely with that. I know other regions had a few adjustments to it, but for our region that worked out in terms of producing a map that identified environmental justice focused populations. Absent kind of a statewide methodology and mapping process for environmental justice, within our equitable planning section, we really looked at reviewing existing definitions from statute and from other equity frameworks produced by the state, as well as looking at existing state and national mapping tools and indices to start to get a clear idea of where vulnerabilities might lie in terms of social and environmental factors. So for example, we looked at the Vermont Environmental Disparity Index to start to get an idea of where benefits and burdens might be distributed across the region. And then another important part to this piece is the geospatial analysis. So looking at related benefits and burdens. And we followed a similar model to what Northwest Regional Planning Commission did and Addison County, grouping those related benefits and burdens and using data, kind of proxies to start to get an idea of where those overlap with each other and comparing the distribution to those environmental justice focused populations on the right, they're mapped compared to the region. We'll note that our GIS bandwidth was very low at the point when we were completing this because there were so many hours going to the future land use map. And so you'll note that in our plan, we have the table outline. We've started reviewing our policies within our plan just to kind of get an idea of where we're addressing benefits and burdens for all of those ones that are grouped together. But you'll see lots of yellow highlighted sections of that table. We are still working on the mapping process to make sure that it is clear and cohesive and kind of representative of the region. So that will be completed in our final draft.
Thank you. This is Sarah Had. Thank you for your presentation. Board members, we have 14 minutes to ask questions. Brooke, you got to go ahead.
I know you'll have more than I.
Alex. Okay, this is Alex. First comment, really well done from what I've been able to digest so far on the environmental benefits and burdens analysis. The meaningful participation, to my mind, you nailed that, and the way you did it, I thought was great. And the analysis itself, you were smart to use Northwest as a template or an example, because we thought Northwest did an excellent job. Anyway, so kudos on that. My question is, every time I look at future land use maps for a region, I try to look, as a former municipal planner, I try to look municipality by municipality, and I like to link back if I can, especially if something looks a little odd, to the municipal future land use map. What's in their town plan? And sometimes I'll look at zoning, but I like to look at the town plan. And so you're our last pre-application, our last region to do a pre-application. I've never asked this question before. I wish I had asked it from the start. I bet you are more aware than I am if there are any discrepancies that really jumped out at you between your member municipality future land use maps and what you ended up with as a regional future land use map. And maybe you don't know, because there's just a lot to juggle in your mind. But are you aware of any? Are there any that sort of jump out at you like, yeah, we're a little out in front of Waterbury, or Moortown is out in front of us? And that's my question.
Start. I have a thought, but why don't you get started?
One thought. Okay.
I have just one.
This is Brian Voigt speaking. Yeah, thanks for the question, Alex. I certainly spent a lot of time looking at the municipal future land use maps as part of this overall process. A handful of our municipalities, their zoning map doubles as their future land use map, which is a bit unfortunate because in my mind, it's not necessarily forward looking. And I mean, I understand from a practical reason why that can happen. It is a bit confusing for folks to wrap their heads around, but generally speaking, I would say 19, I think, of our 23 communities have fairly reasonable future land use maps. So we did use those maps as the basis of our mapping. Some municipal plans do a better job than others of describing what the intent is of their future land use map and the areas that they've designated within there. So it's, as you might imagine, 23 municipalities, 23 different ideas about the way things should be named. Not really that different than the 400 different zoning classes I think we have in the state if you go through all the municipalities. So a bit difficult to reconcile that. So I would say that there are likely some differences when there wasn't enough language in the municipal plan to necessarily support that direct analysis between their classification and the Act 181, the requirements of the Act 181 classification. I think that certainly in Montpelier, Waterbury, Berry City, there has been some pushback on the rural conservation designations, again, in those high hazard areas where we see municipalities treating those a little bit differently. So I think there's still going to be some work to do around that as well. But in terms of, are we pushing forward faster than municipalities on incentivizing development? I don't think so. I think we pushed the boundaries about as far as we could, given the language of the existing municipal plans and municipal future land use maps.
Christian Meyer, the only thing I'll add is I think sometimes municipal planning outpaces municipal plans. Doesn't mean the work's not being done. Doesn't mean the engineering hasn't happened. It doesn't mean the capital improvement program hasn't been written. It just means maybe it's not on the future land use map. So through our one-on-one engagement with municipalities, so there were parcels that have made their way onto our map that maybe aren't on the current iteration of a local. Planning's happened.
This is Alex. That's part of why I asked the question, because when I was in municipal government, my community definitely got out in front of its plan at times. And so I know that happens and it's okay. But as us, as a state land use review board, we're not gonna know when that happened. And so there might be times when, after today, we're sitting there in front of our computers for hours looking at these maps and critiquing them when we shouldn't be. And so if you know of like 4 or 5 communities who are doing what you just said, Christian, that you want to like say, hey, FYI, these communities, they're a little ahead of their plan, but here's why. That might be helpful. And it doesn't necessarily need to come in the pre-app. It could be that we'll make a comment about it and ask for more information that you could submit with your final. But I'm just trying to sort of anticipate that. And if you have any knowledge that you can impart immediately, then happy to take it and not be so picky about those particular places.
So Brian Voigt speaking here. I think a perfect example of that, Alex, is the Prospect Heights parcel in Berry City. I kind of thought I had put Berry City to bed as I was marching my way through all the communities, and the news article that I drew a lot of that information about the Prospect Heights development from was published in June. I think I got done with Berry City maybe in February and took my Berry City hat off and didn't want to think about it because I had 22 other communities to think about. So anyway, we've uncovered a few of those through dialogue with municipalities. I envision that we'll probably hear some more about that as we continue to meet with the communities and discuss the draft map. And the other avenue I think that we'll see that is hopefully see that is through the interactive map and the feedback we receive there. Because when we go out to municipalities, we talk about first we talk about how confusing it is, or other people talk about how confusing it is, and we agree. And then encourage people to look at the methodology, which they're not likely to do, and I don't blame them. But from my perspective, it's sort of your community better than I do. You've got friends throughout town. If your parcel is one color and your friend has a parcel that you consider to be the same thing and it's a different color, point that out to us, because that's going to be where we potentially uncover some inconsistencies. But I had a conversation with a municipality last week where someone brought an example like that up. My parcel is in rural ag and forestry, and my neighbor's parcel is in rural general. What's the deal? And we looked at the two. Parcel was 30 acres and the other parcel was like 3 or 4 acres. So sometimes there's going to be an easy explanation. Sometimes I think we're going to have to go back and consult with municipal staff to see if there are examples like that where it's like, oh no, planning work has been done here, but as Christian mentioned, we haven't necessarily captured it in one of our formalized documents, but it's working its way through the proper channels up to the select board, et cetera, before we formalize that in a plan or something like that.
Good job. Thanks.
So Sarah had, I'm going to keep it quick. I'll reiterate a little bit of what Alex have adapted a little bit differently is you have both the benefit and the burden of going last. And we are also continuing to build the plane and fly it. And so amidst all of this, we have 150 passed and adopted and enacted as July 1st, which changed some of underlying premise of 1A1 future land use. So I think there are some things as I was reading it that, yep, you're probably just in the next reiteration going to need to clean things up to align with some of those finer points that came in with 152. Just a couple of things in now reviewing a bunch of other plans and some things that came up in different areas. And I'll just go through them quickly. PFAS, PFOAs, forever chemicals, big thing in other areas in the state. Didn't see it mentioned really in your plan. Just not an issue within this area? Question?
I would say it is an issue. Christian Meyer is an issue. I think it speaks to the need of a fully rewritten plan, something we're working towards. But it's certainly, if that's an advisory comment, something we would look at the existing plan and see if there's an opportunity to jigsaw something in.
Thank you. And sorry, I'm going to do these sort of rapid fire. Just, it's curious, some of these might not be an issue. This is Sarah Had. We're seeing, particularly with the adaptation of transportation services and sort of the scaling in the adaptation, a lot of other areas have gone to microtransit as being the principal thing to service particularly more rural areas. Didn't really see that within your transportation plan. Again, not a concern, just not there yet, or
Christian Meyer, mixed bag on that one. We have
Just speak up.
Christian Meyer, it's kind of mixed on microtransit. We've had it in the area for just about 5 years now, and it's not necessarily a priority for expansion.
Understood. Thank you. And I think this is Sarah Had, the other question I have is regarding the evaluation of compatibility with adjacent RPC areas. Was looking for that within the plan. Is there an area that I should have focused on to look for that?
Christian Meyer, it's part of our compatibility statement. It's not there. I've had one. I've had conversations with our neighbors, so the work's been done. May just need to be revisited.
It's just Kari Pelletier adding me the compatibility statement on page 17. I've submitted with the application, which goes until page 19.
This is Sarah Had, so thank you. I saw the compatibility statement, but in terms of evaluation of, I don't think it was within that compatibility statement, but thank you. I will reread that. And this is Sarah Had again. Thank you. I think there were some things that were in this plan that we had seen in other plans. And you are the capital region, so you had a interesting take on historic site markers, which was really nice to see, which we hadn't seen in some of the other areas. And also you had a really good conversation on TBM, transportation demand management, so it's nice to, as you read through the different plans, it's nice to see where some other areas you get through all the other plans and yours has something that none of the rest do. But then again, it's better than the burden of going last in terms of then you take a look and like, oh, these are some of the other things that we have seen that we haven't seen here. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Brooke so she has a chance the time remaining.
This is Brooke Dingeldine. I am very impressed by the involvement of municipalities in your efforts in coming to a regional plan that seems to be very compatible with the town plans and also with input and continuing conversations with municipalities. I'm curious, are there any issues that were raised or objections by any of the towns that you were not able to address or resolve that still remain the issues that need to be worked out? Where they are not satisfied with the way in which you handled a particular issue?
Plan itself, we're on pretty good ground with the narrative. It's Christian Meyer. We're on pretty good ground with the narrative. Went through a lot of work between 2024, 2026 on elements of on areas that of our plan that had seen bigger changes, like the enhanced energy element or the energy elements that make up our enhanced energy plan. And we work closely with municipalities to iron those out. So at this point, those are on firm ground. I would say ongoing issue would really be that rural conservation in our downtowns and flood areas. We have a number of municipalities who have stated concerns about that. So we need to find a solution for that works for both the regional priorities and the local plans.
Guess I just want to follow up. This is Brooke Dingledine again. With a similar question about any individual properties or parcels that have at this preliminary stage or draft plan stage indicated that there's concern or issues that need to still be ironed out with individual property owners.
Not that I'm aware of.
It's the one in Montpelier on the west side of town.
Oh, up on yeah, up on off Terrace.
Yes.
Yeah, we have one. We're going to do a site visit with a local landowner.
This is Brooke again. Thank you very much, because I'm very impressed with the amount of interaction there seems to be with your municipalities. And didn't see any comments yet registered that indicated any concerns by those towns. So congratulations on quite an effort with all of your folks.
This is Sarah Had. I'm going to ask that you stop the screen share. We are back. We are 1 minute over, so we're kind of on time. We have the next part of meeting to be questions from state partner agencies. I'm not seeing where we have anybody from a state partner agency online, and I don't think we have any in the room. But would you, if you're another state partner agency and wish to speak, either raise your hand in the room or online for me. I see no one raising hands, so we will now move to having public questions and comments. And I will first try and take those in the room. And I would ask for those online, feel free to raise your hands. If you can't raise your hand, you can speak, but let's try and get through some of the folks in the room first if we can. So I would take, and I apologize, this room is oddly set up and I am a daughter of teachers and I somehow neglected to get the eyes on the back of my head. So I apologize. You can throw something at the back of my head, but if you would like to go first. If you would state your name as you're recognized.
Mike Miller, and I'm with the city of Montpelier. I'm the planning director. So I'll kick this off real quick. Just to say, you know, Montpelier is, we're the compact settlement that's going to help maintain our rural countryside. So we really have taken it upon ourselves to try to make sure that we're going to accommodate as much of the future housing growth as we can. The housing targets that have been provided, we support and agree with for the city. They're a little bit front loaded, so that's the way the numbers work. But for the long-term number, it does match what the city's goals are, which are 75 units a year. And we have a goal of trying to increase 1,500 housing units over the next 20 years. I think the math works out right on that. So we do have a goal. Our water and wastewater systems are at 50% capacity. And we think the map, the future land use map that the CVRPC has put together is a really good start. We intend to have our planning commission vote on Monday to submit a letter to you with some additional suggestions, and we'll obviously pass that on to the commission. We think there's one error on the map, and we believe there are just some other areas that have been classified as transition that should be the planned growth area, and a few rural growth areas or rural generals that might better be classified as transition. Our submission will be specific and with justification, so we hope it'll be relatively quick process. And we do support the RPC's discussion, or at least having that conversation with you about having the resilient designation. We do have places like, for us, it's a relatively small area, but it's, Montpelier High School, Department of Labor, and those areas are all designated for conservation. And we know that we could have resilient infill in those areas if for some reason those stopped being the current uses. We would like to see the opportunity, or at least recognize that as a future area that we could grow within those areas. We are obviously a community that experienced a lot of flooding and a lot of damage, and we do know how important it is to be resilient. But we also like to go and make sure that the public understands that in our flood, we had 7 buildings, something like that, that did not flood. Those were all buildings that were built after the flood regulations came into effect. So the reason we had a lot of flooding and a lot of damage and a lot of recovery is, yes, we were built in the floodplain, but we also weren't built to flood codes. And those projects that have been built since we've adopted flood hazard regulations in 1973 have all remained dry in the flood events. And going forward, our new regulations add 2 feet on top of those earlier requirements. And we think certain places, if the high school merged with U32 and that space became available, we could be able to infill in there in elevated areas in a responsible way, because it's walkable and close to the downtown. We don't think every floodplain should do that, but we do believe in certain areas, such as these parcels that are over on Memorial Drive, it could make sense that these would be eligible and not be designated. It seems strange to have a future land use map that nobody thinks that's the future of these parcels. Nobody thinks this is going to be rural conservation. It's a confusing designation to have for an area that we're never going to make that. It's never going to be that. So there's just some thoughts. We know that's part of the statute and the way it was written. But those are some of the quick thoughts that we have, but we will be providing some written testimony.
Apologize, I heard somebody over here.
My name's Lee Catania, and I'm from the town of Orange. And I got a meeting at 4 o'clock in Montpelier that I gotta get to, so I'll be real brief with it. This is causing a lot of, say, unrest in towns like Orange that are not developed, because it came out there were going to be tier 3 designations. People were all upset about that. They're looking at the map now and they're seeing the areas that aren't developed. And well, is that going to be the future land use? Are we not going to develop anything outside of what's developed now? And that's causing a lot of anxiety. And I think it's because the way the law was, you say it's statutory, but it's really getting people upset. So I'll just leave it at that. Thanks a lot.
Anyone else in the room?
Thomas Weiss, resident of Montpelier. I'm a civil engineer with experience in creating and reviewing plans. And I appreciate 2 ancillary documents that the board has prepared for use. And one of them is the checklist on all of the goals and things that you're supposed to meeting and where in the report it is. After reading the report, then that helps me clarify as to where are these things addressed if I wasn't sure of it myself. And the second is the similar document that you've prepared for comments. That's helping me refocus my comments. I do have 2 or 3 comments. Other than that, first is implementation. The draft plan has goals, policies, and strategies throughout. There are something like multiple hundred of them. And there's an implementation plan in chapter 18, which only has 14 actions and strategies. And so I have no idea which policies or strategies are in the implementation plan because they don't cross-reference each other. Are there goals, policies, and strategies that won't be implemented, and should they maybe not be in the plan? And a lot of those are the same. Goals, policies, and strategies are the same as in the 2016 plan. They haven't changed. So it's like, why? What's happened since then? And I acknowledge that Christian said that this version is a quick update for the statutory changes, but you know, the plan was readopted 2 years ago. And then this will be a new plan on top of that readoption, and everything goes back 10 years, 10 years ago. So I'm a little concerned with that, and how it's going to get resolved. The other major item for today is that one of the goals is that Vermont's air, water, wildlife, mineral, and land resources should be planned for use and development according to the principles set forth in the Act 250 criteria. And this goal becomes more and more important as there are more exemptions to Act 250. The regional plan is written around certain regional planning commission actions happening when there's an Act 250 permit to be addressed or application. But as we get fewer and fewer of them, there are fewer interactions for the regional planning commission with the Act 250 criteria. And Kristen mentioned earlier a project of, I think, 12 housing, hypothetical, 12 housing units in a downtown, and getting involved with the Act 250 permit. But there won't be an Act 250 permit for those 12 houses because they're now exempt. So the draft plan I didn't find mentioned how its planning supports the principles of the Act 250 criteria in all locations, whether or not there's an Act 250 permit. That's the way I read that particular goal. It's the goal 6A in, I remember, it's in, I think it's 4302C. I think it's goal 6A there. So those are two concerns. I have other things I'm looking at that I do plan to submit comments, which I guess August 6th or 7th. I'm not sure exactly which date is the 30 days period for getting comments in. So thank you for listening to my comments.
Sarah had, thank you. And Brooke, would you like to clarify when the close of public comment is? And where would we? I have my fingertips earlier.
In your database.
Oh,
Thomas
I don't want to misspeak.
This is Alex. While Brooke is looking, I tried to figure it out based on the dates in my own calendar. I tell myself that those comments are due August 7th. But Brooke, you're the shepherd on this, so I trust your dates better than mine.
The notice of completion was July 8th because July has 31 days. The 30-day time period deadline would be August 7th.
Thank you.
And this is Brooke Dingledine saying.
Sarah had, anyone else on this side of the room? All right, let me turn my chair. Anyone on this side of the room? Yes.
Stephen Whitaker, Montpelier.
I had separated questions because I had questions for hoping that AOT and others would be here, but I'm gonna just go through the oral comments, and I don't know, I'll have to research whether there's an opportunity to have questions or maybe propose questions that y'all might choose to ask. First, a separate comment was raised with the board. The map before you is not in a fixed form. Appendix A to the pre-application contains no future land use map. It contains legacy thematic sheets drawn between 07 and 17 at roughly 1 inch to 3.5 miles, a scale the parcel's narrower than the line used to draw a road. What actually is being relied on appears to be the live online map service. A live service has no version, no date stamp, no fixed extent. Two people who consulted on different days may see different things, and neither can demonstrate what the other saw. We saw some of that today. There's a check you can run without the map. The review checklist reports Montpelier's planned growth area at 1,995 acres. Appendix D of the same plan reports 1,962. Two exhibits in one submission don't agree on the size of the area you're asked to approve. That matters now more than it would have 3 years ago because Act 250 jurisdiction is location based. A planned growth area designation is the predicate for Tier 1A, and Tier 1A removes the land from Act 250 review. Under Section 4348 (M), once you approve a plan, it's not appealable. Legal jurisdiction now attaches to a polygon, and in a GIS, both the geometry and the category attribute underneath it can be edited without any visible change to the boundary. Secondly, the criteria that matter most for Montpelier are not addressed. The Commission's own checklist justifies Montpelier's planned growth area, the largest in the region by a factor of 2, and about 10 times the size of its own downtown, in 4 sentences. Those sentences address water, wastewater, flood hazard, and municipal zoning intent. They say nothing about criteria the 3 little I's. I know this is tough to translate the statutory I, little I, walking distance from the downtown. They say nothing about criteria 7, transportation infrastructure conforming with complete streets principles and establishing pedestrian access directly to the downtown. In your Chittenden County response last December, you declined to find that a growth area edge on Cochrane Road in Richmond met the requirements where walkability was not demonstrated, and you asked that it be supported or mapped as infill or transition instead. I would ask you to apply the same approach here. Third, the record can't show what the public made of it. At the Commission's July 7 Regional Plan Committee meeting. Oh, just as an aside, I think it's worth mentioning that the guy who made the comments about the blowback and left, he chairs the regional project review subcommittee of the regional plan. That's the meeting he has to go to. And I've repeatedly raised issues of regional impact, and the response is hard no. If it doesn't apply for an Act 250 permit, we don't talk about it. And that's a real gap here, especially when we know this is a pursuit of a Tier 1A for Country Club Road. Staff reported roughly 25 comments received on the map region-wide across 23 municipalities and stated that the commission does not track who submits them. A commissioner reported posting the request in his town and receiving no response at all. I'm not faulting the effort. I'm not suggesting comments should carry names. I raise it because Section 4348 (a) incorporates the definition of meaningful participation at 3 VSA Section 6002 (6), which requires that communities be enabled and administratively assisted to participate fully through education. A colored polygon with no per parcel basis not enable anything. It presents a conclusion. What I'm asking for. The remedy is small. The future land use digital data layer is already a required attachment for the 7 criteria. Water, wastewater, flood hazard, zoning already exist as state municipal data. Attaching them to parcels is a table join, not a study. I would ask the board to comment that for every parcel proposed for a planned growth area and for the parcels immediately outside the proposed planned growth area boundary, the layers carry an attribute for each of the 7 criteria: valued, met, not met, or not evaluated. The comparison between an included parcel and the excluded parcel next to it is the only thing that makes the boundary intelligible to a resident. And I would note that the commission already does exactly this elsewhere in the same filing. Appendix B comments to identifying preferred energy sites to the parcel level with constraints carried as a mapping layer. Energy siting gets parcel resolution. The designation that removes 2,000 acres from Act 250 gets 4 sentences. The risk here is asymmetric. Over designation is permanent. Once the plan is approved and it's not appealable, Tier 1A removes Act 250 review, and that removes criteria 9B and the primary agricultural soil protections of 10 VSA section 6093. Once those are switched off for a parcel, no later map correction restores the soils. Under designation is curable. Section 4348J permits minor boundary amendments without a plan amendment. Section 4348(n) permits amendments in light of changed conditions. Section 4348(p) requires adoption by the end of this year, and a minimally drawn map meets that deadline exactly as well as an expansive one. The legislature built an on-ramp for growth areas to expand as municipalities demonstrate readiness. It built no off-ramp for growth areas drawn too large. I would ask the board to comment that planned growth areas be approved only where each criteria is affirmatively supported on the record, and that acreage beyond that showing be deferred to the section 4348J and the 4348N processes. I don't want to get into Country Club Road specifically because you're running out of time, and I think I will be submitting prepared comments. If this is the only forum in which Q&A is allowed, I have some prepared questions that I would like to offer.
Well, this is Sarah Had, and thank you. We still have people online that have not had a chance to speak.
I'll
If
take
it's
it.
all right, I'd love to offer them the chance to speak and we can come back to you
Sure.
because this is the correct forum for Q&A on this. Our response after this will be the pre-application response. With that, is there anybody online that would like to be addressed? Please raise your hand or come off mute. Any questions or comments? Hopefully we don't have a frozen screen. This has been the week of technology fails. Please indicate sign of life if you're online.
That stings.
Okay.
I hear you.
Thank you, and thank you for Catherine for verifying. I'll offer one more time. Is there anybody online that would like to speak? Is there anybody in the room that has not had a chance yet to speak that would like to speak?
I'll say something. Tim Sinnott, Montpelier Planning Commissioner. Thank you all so much. This is really a great meeting to follow along with. Thank you to Christian and team, Brian, leading that live map review. I work in that space and it's highly challenging and I really appreciate it. My day job is I work in mapping and conservation. And we are constantly working with land trusts to conserve land. I've done this for my entire career. I joined the Planning Commission 2 years ago, and truly loving Montpelier and knowing Montpelier as a place that is struggling deeply with a housing crisis. Vermont has a housing crisis. Montpelier specifically has a housing crisis. I would argue that a 10 square mile city that represents the center of central Vermont, is actually under designating land for housing development. And I bring up my day job because I'm an environmentalist at heart. This is the space that I live and breathe. And simultaneously, we desperately need more housing. The one property that Brian and Kristen were mentioning, the Goldman property that's on the western side of Montpelier, it's a singular parcel that's currently split in two. It really should be fully designated under planned growth. Country Club Road is a giant opportunity. It represents potentially 300 units. In the next 5 years, I think the CVRPC has designated us as a citywide to hit about 529 units. Country Club Road represents a portion of that. The rest of that housing, where does that housing go? Infill other large private parcels that are fully ready for development, two of which are Goldman properties, need to be fully within our planned growth area. So I'm here to sort of represent the yes to housing push in Montpelier. We are the central hub. We should be represented as such. As Mike mentioned, Planning Commission, Housing Committee, and the Planning Department are putting together recommendations that we'll be discussing next Monday, and I'm excited to get those over to the Land Use Review Board and CVRPC. Thank you.
I'll come back quickly to online. Is there anybody else online that would like to speak? Has not spoken. Anybody else in the room that has not yet had a chance to speak that has not spoken? We have 4 minutes remaining, and you had indicated you had additional questions, so please. If you identify yourself one more time for the record.
Steve Whitaker. A question for the RPC: were owners and abutters to land newly designated planned growth areas individually notified that the designation is a predicate for Tier 1A status and that Tier 1A status removes the area from Act 250 review?
No.
That's fine. Has the commission informed the public that the right to object to this plan before the Land Use Review Board under 4348I is available only to those who comment at a hearing held by the commission?
Planned for the first part of the first hearing, an educational phase. Christian Meyer.
Is there a change log capturing edits to both geometry and attribute data with date, editor, and authority in our future land use, regional future land use map?
Clarify the question.
Is there a change log being collected, compiled? What do you call it?
The one that's posted on Christian Meyer, the one that's posted on the Land Use Review Board's website, the one that we manage internally, the one that's posted to our website.
The map that we're going to continue tinkering with.
Yes, there will be. Any changes that get made between the version that is currently posted on the Land Use Review Board and the final application those changes would all be called out.
And this is Sarah Had for the Land Use Review Board. Our online portal does have archive, and we do have the standard operating procedure for GIS data submission.
So, okay, Steve Whitaker again. The prior adopted regional plan designated Country Club Road as rural. Actually, it's the current operative regional plan. What changed on what record to support planned growth area?
The most obvious is 181, the methodology that it prescribes.
This is Christian again.
Sorry, thank you. Christian Meyer. Act 181, the methodology that it prescribes, local planning efforts that have taken place in the last 10 years. There are a number of factors.
That's Brian Boyd. I'll also chime in that the property was acquired by the city with the specific intention of developing housing.
And the other ones to the board is
Steve Whitaker.
Thank you. I admire how y'all have operationalized that. Can the board indicate an expected timeline for the jurisdictional opinion request from January on the Country Club Road property? And I don't expect an answer right now, but
This is Sarah Had, and that is nothing that we can answer for you at this time.
I understood that. I just think it's a relevant question.
This is Alex, and yeah, I like Sarah. I can't speak to specific jurisdictional opinion requests, but we help oversee the program, and I'm happy to inquire about it.
This is Brooke Dingledine. Peter Gill, our executive director, would be the proper person to address any inquiries to, as he supervises the district coordinators who have statutory authority to produce jurisdictional opinions for our program.
I understand, Steve Whitaker again, I understand that, and records request status, ETA requests have been piling up for months, and there's some correspondence on evading Act 250 between Mike Miller and Peter Gill that I received from the board through a records request.
So this is Sarah Had. I'm going to bring this back to the matter at hand,
Okay.
which is our review of the pre-application request. I apologize. We need to stick to that specific matter. So if you have any further questions or comments on that, absolutely. However, anything on pending JOs,
Okay.
other enforcement or things like that should not.
The checklist narrative for the Montpelier Planned Growth Area addresses water, wastewater service, flood hazard, municipal zoning intent. Where in the filed record does the commission address walking distance and criteria 7 complete streets for this area for Country Club?
Sorry, Christian Meyer, didn't hear the question. Could you repeat it?
The checklist. Well, one, the property, there's two questions. The property has a split designation, a planned growth area over the majority of it and a rural general over the eastern forested block. What's the basis for the boundary between the two? This is Brian Boyd. As far as I can tell / recall, and maybe Mike Miller can help me out, but I don't believe that the portion of the parcel outside of the planned growth area is being considered for development as part of the Country Club Road project.
Christian Meyer, I'll add, I've gotten some telegraphing from participating in local Montpelier meetings. That may be counter to the comments we're going to get. That little ear is going to be one of the comments that the city would like that included in the planned growth area adjacent to it, for what it's worth.
Which existing, Steve Whitaker again, which existing facility does the commission identify as satisfying criterion 7 for this area? Or does the commission rely on planned infrastructure in which adopted municipal capital program is it included in?
The criteria that you're talking about, the multimodal, Christian Meyer, that's right? The multimodal question.
Well, this was, yes.
Do you want to answer first? And then if there's any holes I can fill in, you know better.
Sorry, I was taking other notes. This is Brian Voigt. Your question is about the multimodal connectivity to downtown. Is that correct? Yeah, so as mentioned previously, there is the access to the multimodal path at the intersection of Country Club Road and Route 2. And as discussed earlier, the city has funding in place to extend a bike lane in the uphill direction up Country Club Road, a sidewalk on the other side of the road. And we think that between the existing pedestrian infrastructure and the planned pedestrian infrastructure meets the requirements according to the methodology.
Christian Meyer, I'll just add that also in past conversations with the former transit operator, there was a willingness to provide transit to this area should the densities that are being discussed be reached at this location.
I have more questions, but you were trying to sunset at 4 o'clock. I will incorporate them into comments, written comments before the 7th.
Sarah had, how much more time would you need?
10 minutes, 5 minutes?
You could make it 5 minutes. I'd say let's,
Okay.
I think we can do that.
Steve Whitaker, what's the walking distance and route from this parcel to the Montpelier downtown? The source for that figure?
Brian Boyd, that question's already been answered, I believe. Go down to the multi-use path, turn right, and walk until you get to downtown.
What's the distance?
No longer have my GIS software open, so I can't tell you.
All the vehicular access to the parcels through a single intersection with Route 2. Has the commission considered access redundancy in assessing whether the area is served by transportation infrastructure within the meaning of criteria 7?
Christian Meyer. Not directly under the future land use map, but as part of the Montpelier plan approval process, much discussion was given to municipal plans to potentially expand transportation to the east out of the parcel.
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier's planned growth area is roughly 10 times the size of its downtown and twice the next largest in the region. In CVRPC 04-0001, the board recommended that where planned growth areas are proportionally large relative to their centers, the centers be expanded or the growth areas decreased to address proportionality and walkability. Has the commission applied that consideration here?
What are you referencing?
PC 04/-0001, which is one of your proceedings.
That's actually the.
This is Sarah had, this is, that was, I believe, the pre-application for Chittenden County Regional Plan. And I would say for the sake of time, feel free to continue on with your questions.
So you, all right, you don't know that. How many housing units does the commission attribute to this parcel within the planning horizon, and how was the buildable area determined, given that site characterization is incomplete?
No specific, Christian Meyer, there's no specific attribution of the housing target to a given parcel.
Well, today we heard 300 plus.
That's what the city is planning.
Was the commission aware when the boundary was drawn that a growth center designation covering this parcel was approved in September 24 and revoked the following month? Did that history inform the mapping?
Not inform the mapping.
Can the commission identify an instance in which public comment resulted in a change to the future land use map? Section 4348A states the purpose of the working sessions include gathering information used in developing the future land use element.
Discussing some examples.
Questions of the changes to the.
The map, yeah.
Heights.
Right. Resilience, Prospect Heights, the extension into Berry City, the Warren, Sugar Bush Village, and Waterbury expanding up onto, not Blush Hill, thank you. Yes, in short.
Can I ask a couple questions to the board? Will the board's response letter under 4348 per NB address the sufficiency of the 4348A participation record as it did in the Chittenden County meeting? And again, most rhetorical, I presume it will, but
This is Sarah Had. I think you're very astute at answering your own questions. And I will state that this is a public meeting. Our pre-application response will come after. So I don't think that any of us can sit here and fully predicate what will be in that or not be in that. Just speaking to process, generally what happens after we have this meeting is we as a board then sit and discuss some of the observations, some of our comments. So we have not had that opportunity as a board to have that yet, so I really can't predicate and respond specifically. I apologize, but hopefully you can understand.
Right, last question, Steve Whitaker. Section 4348B places chapter 139 within the scope of this pre-application review, while 4348 (3) does not carry it into later citizen objection. Will the board's response address chapter 139 conformance for the proposed growth areas?
This is Sarah Had. Again, very good question, and I can't speak to the specifics of what will be in the pre-application response at this time. This is Sarah Had, and yes, I was turning around. Sorry, I'm trapped here, so.
Sorry,
Please.
just Tim Sennett, Planning Commission in Montpelier, just a couple of additional thoughts. Montpelier is extremely walkable. It is hilly, but it's very small city. From Country Club Road to our city hall, it's exactly 2 miles. It's completely flat. It's very safe for both biking, walking, jogging. There's sidewalks and bike paths along the entire way that are as protected as they get in Montpelier. Extremely walkable throughout the entire city. I just wanted to say one additional thing. Steve didn't bring this up, but he's brought it up a bunch in the planning commission meetings. There is prime ag soils in Country Club Road, something that he will address in comments in the future, or he has in the past as well. These must be addressed, protected. It's essential for our city and essential for the state. I want to note that there are prime ag soils there. If you look at the acreage of prime ag soils on that property compared to our entire region, there's 16,000 acres of prime ag soils in the Central Vermont region. It represents 0.15% of prime ag soils in the region. With that said, again, with my background in environmental mapping, we have a housing crisis. The Country Club Road represents a huge opportunity for a little bit of more of new housing that is essential for Montpelier, for the region, and the state. And I think I'll leave my comments at that.
I appreciate that. This is Sarah Had, and apologize. We are over time at this point. I thank you all for bearing with us. We had a lot of ground covered today, and I appreciate all the comments and the presentation and site visits. Board members unless there's anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move to adjourn. Brooke Dingledine.
I will second that with a request for just a little discussion before we adjourn.
Yes.
We don't usually do on motion to adjourn, but so just to reiterate that per Brooke's calendar and mine, August 7th is the deadline for folks to submit comments to us to consider as a part of our pre-application review. We do have, as Thomas indicated, a form online to help you. Some have commented that the form is rather difficult to interface with because we're asking for comments in relation to the statutory requirements, and there's a little box for each. And like Thomas said, for some it works for them and others not. I just want people to understand, you do not need to use that form to submit comments. Like you want to type up a simple email and email it to act250.board@vermont.gov, or you want to craft a letter, that's a fine way to submit comments as well, beyond just using our form. And yeah, that was all I wanted to clarify.
This is Sarah Had, and I will say that after that so we have 60 days from August 7th for the pre-application response. And so after the comment period is due, Generally, we will as a board have some discussions at upcoming meetings, not yet scheduled, so please stay tuned. And with that, is there anything else for discussion points on the motion to adjourn?
Only that, again, per my calendar, our response to the region is I believe due September 7th. So we hope to have it prior to that, but that's the deadline. So again, August 7th, if you want to give us comments and if you're interested in what we say about this at a pre-application level, check back with us after September 7th.
All right, unless there are any other objections, I'll take a vote on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're unanimous and we're adjourned. And Catherine, will you stop the recording or should I?
Any of us can do it.